you feel like you actually took a trip away, and then when the book comes back and you get the return of Carla Maravelli, or Carla Schmidt, who then marries Paulie, and you get the return of Big Frank, and you get the return of Bit to Reality and Andy Warhol, it's like waking up and saying, oh yeah, that's where we were. Because if you allow that big chapter to work on you, it sort of purges you, but it forces the mind to sort of take the memories of that huge book beforehand and compress them, and it sort of like embosses the earlier part of the book into your brain, so that when you come back to certain characters like a Tony Luft, and the next time, the last time he has the Christmas scenes, uh, it feels like you have actually experienced that along with Luft, or along with Big Frank. It makes the reading of Paulie and Tony Luft and Bit as if they're old friends that you're actually remembering things from. And that was one of the things that when I did the 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 long conversations, uh, was to get that effect. And I by doing the total immersion, it it like I said, it embosses the earlier part of the book, and it so you have this sort of 900 thousand plus word dividing. It's like a big black magic marker, and when you get through that, you've somehow been transformed. And then the last part of the book, the action picks up much more quickly paced than earlier before too. So you've gone the whole that whole chapter 54 acts not only as a buffer or a filter, but it somehow transmutes the whole tenor of the book.
It's also a perfect rendering of two things. First, an acid trip, because if you take the indented sections and kind of lay them over each other, it makes a nonsensical narrative in itself. And then there's also that it's perfect rendering a bit in the sense that, and he speaks about this briefly about his his minutes kind of bleeding into each other and kind of oozing into a rainbow of sorts. It works in how repetitious his mind is too, and how he kind of loops in on himself over and over.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get about the first reference to time might be about 150, 200,000 words into the acid trip, and he asks one of the other characters, might be older Bit, and the Bit says, "Oh yeah, we've been here 40 minutes through this," and it's 150,000 words if you're reading it, and you're like, "What? He's only been away for 40 minutes," which might really only be 10 seconds in the diegetical mind of Bit and his acid trip too.
Yeah, sometimes there's fast forwarding techniques too, where they fast forward through passages of the public domain.
Yeah.
And while I bring that up, this is as good an argument for the opening up of the public domain as there ever has been, because it takes the public domain material and uses it in a completely different way. Before we speak about that, though, I want you to turn to page 2092, and it's kind of interesting what leads up to this acid trip. They're at a Jim Morrison concert, or really the Doors, and he begins reading from Moby Dick. And the sections of Moby Dick actually perfectly sum up the relationship between Cole and Schneider, as well as what will eventually happen with the two bits. At the meantime, Andy Warhol and Bit are skirmishing with each other, and and Andy Warhol's in a deep rage while Bit is mocking him. It's a hilarious sequence, but at the same time, it works very well to lead into that acid trip. And I want you to talk about that. You've talked about greasing the wheels kind of in using humor effectively, but it also is a very good summary and, in a sense, an epigraph towards the acid trip.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things that it's interesting to listen to you say that. I can say that I know that I wanted to have, uh, the whole idea of the sum of love and Jim Morrison and taking acid trips and because, at least in terms of published novels, American works, Moby Dick in a sense is probably the most transcendental in a sense book ever written. Uh, so I wanted to have some of those things there. It's interesting that you have read into it there, and I'm not saying that what you what you said about it leading into chapter 54 is untrue, but that's one of those things where, you know, because I have something in mind and I know that that is going to leave, say, a purple mood or say a blue mood in someone's mind, and then I know that what's coming up is red, it's going to mix into something purple and mauve. And so you get these two things and you put them together, and some readers like you might see that melding of the blue and the red chapter and the blue chapter end and the start of the red of the next becomes purplish. If I'm using an analogy here.
Yeah, the
And,
perfect thing about it, though, is it's qualia.
yeah.
Different readers will get different things out of it.
Yeah.
There is also the epigraph of from Rod Serling film Planet of the Apes that opens up Bit of Lit and really the whole of the acid trip sequence.
Well, it opens up the lady from Shanghai. Bit of Lit is part one, and the whole chapter is it's 924,000 words. 924,000 is part one. Then it's about 4,000 in part two. About 200 words, I think, in part three, and then there's one word in part four.